What's happening, everybody? This is Hayden Adams with A Designer Who Codes, and we're talking all about cards, or more importantly, horizontal cards where the picture sits on the left, or in Bootstrap language, the start, with the text on the right/end. And most importantly, we're going to make sure this design moves across all browser sizes and make sure it's completely 100% responsive. We'll start designing from a structural standpoint first, focusing on the structure of the card in the two-column design. Then we'll bring in this picture to make sure it's completely responsive. And then we'll focus on the type, changing it to gray for those little walking tours, and bringing in this icon to finish it up with. And with that, let's get started. All right, so to get started, I'm gonna head over to getbootstrap.com. And if I head down the page, halfway down the doc section, what I'll find is after the components is the starter template section. And in here, I'm going to copy and paste this to clipboard and drop this in an HTML document. I also added a custom CSS file, which we're going to use down the road. So what you'll get as a result in this Bootstrap demo is hello world. All right, so let's actually start building this card right from the get-go. So after the body and the H1, I'll just scroll up a little bit, give myself a little room to work with here. I'm going to add a div class, and I'm going to add cream BG. That's just going to be used down the road to create the cream background you saw at the beginning. And we'll just leave it there for right now, but it's important to put it in at the beginning. After that, we're going to add div class and the container. The container is where all the good stuff sits, and it's also going to help make it become 100% responsive. Now for this design, I'm only going to have one card in this design. However, you might want to have multiple cards. I'm going to build this as if you're going to have multiple, but for this example, I'm only going to have one. That being said, in order to have multiple cards, I have to start with the row. I'm going to say div class row, and then if I had multiple, I'm going to add a gutter of 5, and then to move this into the middle of the page, I'm going to say justify content evenly. You can find out more about this in another video I have. I'll put a link to it in the description. And also you can do a Google search with Bootstrap Flex to see how justify content evenly works. But what it does, it moves things from the middle out, not from the left/start of Bootstrap. So essentially what I'm doing is when I create the column, so if I were to say, in this case, I am going to put this, I'm going to say div class, and I'm going to say call LG6. Call LG6. And if I were to have some type in here, I'll just say P class, and actually let me just set a P and do the word test, for example, right here. And if I were to copy and paste this, what's going to happen is, notice how the test and the test, while they are not sitting on the far left, they're sitting into the middle of the design. So if I were to move this one out of it, what's going to happen is the word test sits in the middle of the design, not the left hand or start of the design, as I have justify content evenly. If I were to take it out, notice how it goes back to the left/start. Let's bring it back in. We're going to need that justify content evenly. So again, the test can go away to make sure it works. I like to use the word test a lot to make sure things operate. Otherwise, I might get too far into this design and go, uh-oh, what happened? So you'll see me use the word test quite a bit in my design work to make sure it's working as I go forward. So again, I have the call LG6, and now we get to add the card. I know, finally, this might have taken a little while longer than you thought in this video. Div class card. Now in the card, we're going to add another set of columns for the left-hand side, or start for Bootstrap for the picture on this left-hand side, and the text on the right or the end. From div class card, I'm going to say div class, we're going to say row, and give it a gutter of 0. We don't want any space between the picture and the type. From here, I'll say div class call -6, and then call MD5. Now, why am I doing it this way? Let me show you. So the word test, I'm going to put in right here. Now, Bootstrap relies on a 12-column design grid, which means if I build another column, I have to match the 6 and the 5 to equate to 12. What that means is I'm going to say div class call 6, but the next one's going to be call, not cold, call MD7. 6 plus 6 equals 12, and 5 plus 7 equals 12. Let's take a look at this. If I say test, now the card shows up with this thin border around the outside. And notice how the word test and test are not sitting perfectly symmetrical. That's because we have 5 and 7 for a width larger than medium. If I move my browser to a smaller size, what's going to eventually happen is the design, there we go, now becomes a 50-50 split, because I do want to show the picture, and as it gets to a smaller size, I want the picture to be more in there as well and create a 50-50 balance of type to image. But on larger sizes, I wanted to make sure, come on browser, there we go, that it was a little off from a 5-to-7 ratio and not a 6-to-6 or 50% in the design. Now that we have kind of our ratios and our design and our grid all set to go, now I can start bringing some content in. So in my example folder, what I do have for my design, if I move my page over here, if we go in the images folder, I've got a picture called coffee shop, which I cropped to a square design. That way it's going to move and shrink and grow, but that way the more of the essence will stay in the middle, and hence why I cropped it to a 50-50 design or a square 1-to-1 ratio. So what I want to do is bring this picture in. So inside that top area, or that first column /left/first or start, I'm going to say image source. And in here, I have an images folder and the coffee shop picture. Now, if I just drop this in and just say coffee shop and then make a slash, it's going to take up that entire space. And I don't want that to happen. I want that picture to be contained within that left/start area of Bootstrap. So I have to bring in a couple classes to make this happen. And then we'll write some CSS to take it even further. I'm going to say class, and then I'll say card image. What that's going to do is it's going to fit the card into this design. And notice though that it does round the corners of all 4 sides. So what I'm going to next do is then say in here, image fluid, to make sure it does become 100% responsive. So if I move this design back and forth, notice how it grows and shrinks based upon the design. Now what I want it to eventually do, because that word test is a little close, what I'm going to also do in this design is I'm going to say rounded start. So rounded start. And what that'll do is it'll take off the rounded on the top right, but we haven't fixed the bottom right in this design. So what I want to do is with this design, I want to take it a step further in my CSS. I'm going to head over my CSS file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in here card image, card dash image. Wow, that was hard to type all of a sudden. I'm going to say width in here be 100%. And then I'll also do a height of 100%. I'm also going to add an object fit. And what this is going to do is it's going to contain the space, but create the cover, not a contain. That means no matter what the size is, the picture will fit somehow in the responsive graphic nature right here. And then to fix this bottom right-hand corner, I'm simply going to say border, bottom, come on, right radius, and I'll say 0px. That just takes out that space and makes sure the picture becomes fluid in our design. Now, if I move this back and forth, you can see how it moves based upon the design that I have going forward in this approach. Again, I want this picture to be super, super fluid at all times. So what I'm going to do is back in the index, and did I add yet? I did add card image, making sure I spelled it properly, which can happen at times that I don't spell it the proper way, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. So card image, image fluid, and rounded start are the 3 class names that we want right here in our design. Since we're already here anyways, actually since we're not here, but let's just go with it in this first place. What I want to do is let's bring in that cream background in this design. So in the custom CSS, again, highest to lowest when it comes to CSS, I'm going to say cream BG, and the cream color I picked out for a background color is going to be F3EAE3. And I do want some padding on the top and bottom. So I'm going to add a padding top, and I'm going to use 2 rem for this one, and a padding bottom to keep it even, also at 2 rem. What I should get is that beautiful looking cream with the top and bottom. Now that white context of the body area in terms of the card body section is popping out the white with that light kind of gray for that border, and a lower world sits at the top. Just for a little bit of cleanup, what I'm also going to do is let's just add a container to hello world. So we'll say div class container, and then drop back in hello world, just because I like how it moves with hello world and the card at the same time. Now you're really starting to see how the justify content evenly is holding the card in the middle of the page. Cool. So let's head back to our index. If we're not, like I was thinking I was, making sure I'm not. So in the index file, what I want to continue moving on is, now that we have the picture in place, I'm now going to move to the content section of the card. So what I'm going to do here is, after the call 6 and the call MD7, is I'm going to say div class. I know a lot of divs in this project. I'm going to say div class, come on, class, and I'll say card body, d flex. I want to do a little extra work, and then flex column. There we go. Drop it in. And if I just say the word test, now also the card body creates a little bit of padding around the edge of this design. And since we are going to do a couple extra things below with spacing, I added a deflex and the flex column. This is completely optional for you to use. It does not require you to use it. The more important part is the card body. All right, so after the word test, we're going to add some content. I'm going to say div class, and I'm going to say H100. This is designed so if you have multiple cards, all your cards will be evenly spaced to go down 100% based upon the picture's overall height. I don't think I have a div for that one. Close div. There we go. Just making sure again, test, everything's holding fine. Now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to add a little H3 at the top to signify a subtitle of the H2, which is going to be coffee tours here and walking tours as the subset of the H3. I'm going to say H3, and I'll say walking tours, as this is versus a driving tour of this coffee tour section. And the one is going to be H3. And then in here in the H3, I'll say class card title. That's going to drop my H3 in here. And then the H2 class card title, I'm going to add as a coffee tour. What I should get is a bigger version of walking tours at the top. H2 should be bigger. H3 should be smaller. I'm going to go in a few minutes more and go to the CSS. We're going to bring in the basic pieces that we're going to design in this card going forward. So for the P section, for the paragraph, I'll say class card text versus double T's. And in here, I brought in a basic little sentence that I wrote, and explore 5 boutique coffee shops. In the downtown region of Eugene, Oregon. You'll experience both drip and espressos brewed fresh exclusively for our small tours. Perfect. That fits in the design right here. And of course, the last two are the price and the actual button to actually buy this tour. So after the paragraph, I'm at an H4. Rarely use H4s, but they do show up once in a while. The class is going to be card title. I'm going to give some extra margin space below because I'm going to add a button. So I'll say MB-3. From here, I'm going to say $, maybe the $sign I can type. And then I'm going to add a strong to give a little extra weight to the actual price. For this one, I'm going to charge $79 for this. And you can see how this 79 got a little bolder with the $sign. And you also noticed that the picture expanded to fit the space based upon the design. If we look at it one more time, if I take out the H4, we went from a square down to more of a little bit of a rectangle just based upon the design. That's where I wanted to bring the picture to be fluid across any size. So if there's more text or less text, it'll still fit. The last thing I'm going to do is bring in a button. And from here, what I'm going to approach this as is I'm going to bring it, let me bring it outside the H100. So that way this will expand and the bottom part will always hold as a button space. So outside the H100, I'll add a div and I'll say class equals, actually, I'm just going to add a div. Take it back. Nothing for there. It's a rare div without a class. Let's bring it in here and we'll type the word test to make sure it goes perfect. Right there below. Notice how the spacing, there was no space for the H4, which is why I had to add the margin bottom so it didn't get so close to the 79. A little extra room in there. And for this car, since I only have one, the H100 doesn't quite fit the bill, but if I had multiple with different amounts of text, then the H100 would kick into place. So for the button, what I have to do is I'm going to say button. Let's actually type the button in here. The type is going to be a button. And then the class I'm going to use for this the class I'm going to use for this is BTN and BTN dark. And we'll say purchase tickets for this design. Now keep in mind, I'm going to come back and bring in an icon right here, but we'll do that at the very, very end. So what I have now is a basic card. If we take a look at it, you can see that this fits in the middle. We have our padding top and bottom. And now this also moves based upon the design and the size of your browser. We're still at that 5.7 at the very end, and eventually it's going to kick to a 50-50 on the left and right, or start and end, especially for the mobile design. It holds it really, really well. So again, we've got the structure in place. Now becomes the fun part to actually stylize the type to make it look really, really sharp. Let's move back this browser to a more of full width. There we go. And there we go. And I'll scoot down a little bit. So now we just have more of the card in place versus our hello world. So now what I want to do is really make this look even stronger than it can be by extra stylizing the heck out of this. In my custom CSS, I'm at a couple things. Inside of here, what I want to do is I'm going to go find a Google font. Google Fonts. And for my design that I used, let me go to, where is Google Fonts? There it is. Is that it? No, not developers. I just want, that didn't work very well. Let's try it again. Google Fonts, Google Fonts. Let's search for what I used as Poppins. Should come up right away. There it is. I liked this one really because it had a lot of different weights to it. So if I scroll down the page, there we go. I have a very light to a very heavy font. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste in my design. If I select what I had was the 2, the 3, and the 400. So in this design, let me actually make this a little bit longer. So in here, I'm going to grab the 2, extra light 200. I'm also going to grab the 300, and I'm going to grab the 400. If I grab the import, I'm going to copy and paste this into my CSS. And I always put this at the very, very top. So I'm going to bring in the Poppins family. So from here, I'm going to add H2, H3, and H4. And then you can either type it or copy it. If I scroll down the page, my CSS, I can drop in right away and just drop in the font family. And now what I should get is the font should change from Walking Tours, Coffee Tour, Price in the H2, H3, and H4. If you want to go for the H1, go for it. I'm just kind of ignoring this and keeping it kind of default at the top of the page. Perfect. I brought the font in, but that H3 is looking a little crazy town because to me, I want it to be really soft, as in a light, almost kind of a subheader to the word Coffee Tour, which is the main section of the tour area I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is let me move this back. Just bring it right about there. Scoot this up a little bit. And under the card image, I'm going to then say card H3. Now, I only have one H3 in this design, but you might have different H3s amongst your design. So again, the card is optional. I'm adding it in just in case for your example, you might have other H3s somewhere in your design. I'll say text transform, and in here I'll say uppercase, and now uppercase for walking tours. Color is going to be RGB, and I used a 177, 177, 177, or a light gray. And this is pretty big. It doesn't really work for how big the walking tours is, for how a little much bigger, I guess that's a phrase, coffee tour is. So in here, what I'm going to do is then semicolon that, and we'll say font size is going to be 0.8 rem. That to me is what I found to be a nice size and balance where it's a subsection of coffee tour. And again, yours might include it being clickable to see other walking tours, but I'm going to keep it there for right now. So the paragraph is okay, but I want to bring it a little closer together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say card P. Again, I only have one paragraph, but you might have other versions of paragraphs. So that's why I added the word card. And I'll say line height, not list style. I thought I had it right in, no pun intended, line height. I added a 1.4 EM. That to me just moves it a little closer together just because I want to save some space and make this as square as possible, if possible. Again, it's not going to always be that way, but I'm always focused on when things move. How can this be at least be as square as possible, especially in the mobile design? It doesn't always happen, but of course this one becomes a tall rectangle, but using our CSS, it's completely responsive. And we'll move this right back over to here. So we have our type really in place with the 79 purchase tickets, coffee tour, and walking tour. The last thing I want to add is an icon to this purchase tickets to give it a pop and for someone to look at and see I can click here for tickets. And you're in luck because Bootstrap contains icons. So if we do a quick Google search, if we just search for Bootstrap icons, what we'll find it is icons.getbootstrap.com, and there's a whole bounty of icons that we can use. For all you React fans, you can npm install this or the node package module, but I'm not using that, so I just have to go old school style. What I need to do is go to install and basically install this in the design, and what I can do is just drop it in via an import. So I'm going to simply go to this via import section, copy it with the CDN, and up at the very top, I'm going to add the icons. Now what I'm looking for is a ticket icon in this design. So if we scroll back up, and I should just hit the home button on my keyboard, and what I'm looking for is more of a shopping cart. So I'm going to say cart. And what I should find down the list, if I maybe say shopping cart could be a little easy. Shopping cart, what I'm looking for in this case is a little cart to put in my design. And for me, I felt like the cart without anything in it was a successful cart design. So I'm going to literally use the cart icon. And if I click on it, what I can do is I can simply copy and paste this icon to bring into my design. Cool. Bootstrap, you rock. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my index file. There we go. Thought I was in my file, but I wasn't, and got me confused for one quick second. What I'm going to then do is inside this button, let's drop this down so you can see how it's going to work. So the button still contains, where is it? Purchase tickets. If we save it, still looks fine. What I want to add is this icon right here into the design. And just like magic, I think it's kind of magic. Maybe I just love this, how code stuff, how it works almost seamlessly when it does. But just like magic, the cart icon comes in, and because it's an SVG file, it knows to make the icon white for purchase tickets. Now it's almost perfect, but my problem is that the cart's a little too close to the word purchase tickets. But the power of Bootstrap is I can add margin end or margin to the right 1 and just give a little extra space between the two. To me, I think about how can I create a little more space than purchase tickets, but not too much more. And so for me, the margin end 1 was the solution to the problem right here. If we look at this from all across all different sides, we can see as we go from big to medium to eventually small, how no matter what size, this card fits absolutely flawlessly and becomes 100% responsive across all sizes of my browser. But I forgot one last little thing, and it's really, really small, but I just noticed it as I was moving my browser back and forth. If I head over to my custom CSS, the start of that card image rounded at the top left and the bottom left, I forgot the top right as well. So what I have to do in my custom CSS, if I come down to the card image, I need to add a border top right. So I'm going to say border top right radius and say 0px. Not quite sure how I missed that, but every so often I just miss little details. It happens. There it goes. That's the last thing to fix up, and now you're all set.